Muted. So the biggest advantage of coming to class is that you have peers to work with in class. Starting the lecture at 6 or starting the lecture at 7:30 is irrelevant to that fact. So leaving early because you have finished your assignment for the day or your studio is fine, but you're not getting the full advantage of what this class is for, which is to be able to learn from your peers in the class, working on assignments, learning new material, or just teaching each other something new with the material we have been covering or we might cover next. So regardless of how we split apart, who starts where, don't feel slighted that one section starts before the other, even if we were to switch them. The purpose of the class largely is so you can get used to working in teams and learning new information as a group. So start time of the class, whatever section you're in, doesn't really matter when one of the big goals is working in a team with other people. So try to keep that in mind as you're working on each one of your sections. All right, we will start actual C# portion now. So the JavaScript people are free to ignore me if you weren't already. The only thing I have to mention for C# before we begin the starter questions is that you have an assignment due this evening. So if you can show that, that would be great. If you aren't done with it, that is all right, but keep in mind, we start another assignment on Monday. So try to make sure you keep up on those assignments, and the assignments sort of get much larger, in my opinion, compared to the previous ones. We get sort of like a little snowball in Unit 1, then Unit 2, they got a little more. I feel like Unit 3's assignments are a lot bigger. Maybe that's just me, but do try to keep up on them. Now you can starter questions in your group with your favorite teaching fellow, which is, of course, your current teaching fellow.
All right, so this section is really about the use, right? So that's what the questions are. First question is, how do you, so you have your controllers, but in the request based on the URL, but how does you get incorporated into the execution? So your controller starts running, and eventually it's going to return some result. How does the program know where to hit?
The controllers have the controller that uses the same name as the controller.
Yep. Yeah, so one major, the convention is that
I'm the worst. I'm muted. Unmuted myself. Sorry for being muted on the stream. One day that will work how it's supposed to, or how I want it to. So we have our form. We are missing one of the most important pieces, which is to have a post. Once we start using views, we're going to be really excited about being able to change our HTML on the fly, not have to restart the server every time. So now if we come here, and I did greet me, but nothing showed up because we don't have it handled currently. But if you notice, it didn't error or throw a 405 exception. And that is because by default, the post, so if we pull up the network traffic, I'll zoom in here for us so we can see it. Click to the preserve log so you can see it across requests, what's happening. So we made a post request to the cheese page, which is where we're currently at, and that's because forms by default submit to the current URL. And some people were sort of mentioning in the groups around how .NET Core MVC handles routing of gets and posts. So by default, it's going to route gets and posts to the exact same method on your controller. So if you make a get or a post to the same action, which in this case, index is the base, this home here. So the name of your controller, and then /index, as we've mentioned before, is the same thing, it's the same URL. The gets and posts, no, I didn't mean save. Does anyone else do that regularly and accidentally try to save the web page? So by default, your get and post requests are going to go to the same handler. Now, an easy way to handle this in .NET Core is to use the filters that it mentioned. So we know we want the HTTP GET for our index. And we know we want to route, I'll just route. So we can go to the route cheese when we do a get here, if we want to do that. So we'll come here. Now we can refresh.
Could you, I apologize, could you explain exactly what that route parameter is doing? So is it saying that that method only serves that URL? Or is that, what does it do?
Yes, so that's actually what I was about to demonstrate there. So this HTTP GET tells your web server that this method is only going to accept GET requests. And then what the route does is says it's going to accept GET requests at this URL. So /cheese and only /cheese. So now over here, /cheese returns what it was before. However, if I go to /index, it's no longer returning because we've overridden the default behavior. Now, the real reason we actually sort of want to do some default behavior overriding is what we actually want to do is create an add location, an add route. We know we want it to handle an HTTP post, it's lowercase. I'm actually going to delete this override because we don't really need it in our solution. And then here I will return for now just view. That's mostly so the code compiles. We can do the .NET run to restart it. Now if we come over here and do a refresh, /cheeseworks and /indexworks, /t/index. Because we removed that overriding that we were doing. It's no longer, we don't really need it there. However, we still have, remember, we have not updated this form. So when we do the post here, we actually get a 404. And that is because it's trying to post to cheese, which we explicitly said only allows GET requests. So now it's going to return a 404. So the first thing we need to go and do is update our form to take an action and do /cheese/add. Restart the server again. Show that this is working as we want it to. Mess it up. Oh, double quotes matter. Double quotes matter. So the error I got there was too many characters in a character literal. When you use single quotes in C#, it's actually similar in other languages as well. It assumes it is a character and not a string. So when you put more than one in there, it's not valid, which is why I got angry. Oh, we'll keep recording. Delete them. So now if I go and type in, go add, it worked, and we got yay. So we know that part is working. The next step is we want to handle the values that we have posted. So it's all the way down at the bottom. I don't really have a way to scroll it further down. So no, I don't. I want the parsed version. So we can see that we're sending a name and a language. Nifty thing, at least I think it's pretty nifty, that you get for free in MVC for parsing those parameters that you send, is you can just call them the type they are. And then you just kind of put them in there. So language and name are the two things that we're sending. We will restart. I'm just doing this really quick here to show that the values are coming across. This is actually, whether or not it's what all developers do, I do this a lot when I'm actually developing, just to make sure everything's working before I try to do anything to make it nicer looking. Now if we go back to cheese. So now we can see we have those values. We're reading those values properly as we wanted to. So the goal here so we want a public static method, create message that will take the names and return what we want. Well, I suppose I could, yeah. I'm going to update this. Rather than having to do .format in all those spots, which is pretty silly, we're going to do it right here. So now all of our calls to PageBase, we can just pass our message into. This will satisfy that requirement a little more too. So we call this page content. And message. And if I'm going through some of this too fast for you to follow, I do post all of the solutions in the link that is in the class for this one. So move that code around just to show that it is in fact doing what we want. That little helper method. We come over here. Still working. So all of that is working. So now we can make a public static dictionary that maps strings to strings. That is incorrect. There we go. There we go. I'm gonna do this again. I'm gonna end up deleting them mostly with this so I can see it in the same area. I'm gonna put each one of our words in here. So it should be 5. That's right. Oh, how about this? Okay. That's what's different. but it's not the same as list. At this point, it would have been faster for me to just call dot add a bunch, but then oh, that's interesting. You notice my cursor went a direction that might not have seemed expected there when I was hitting to the right, and that is because Arabic is read right to left. So our app will actually be completely wrong whenever it shows the display. So I'm not gonna fix that. Now what we want to do is for each one of our language codes, we want to go and show hello properly. And a way to be able to check this, so now we're going to have, we have the name, so we know what we want there. So we'll create our message that we're going to send for the user, which will be a string. We won't do that yet. So a word, comma. And we know that we want, that's the format. It's going to be hello and then name. We'll call this the hello word. Oh, what was a has key? It contains key. So when you get input, you always want to validate that input is valid. So if it has that key, default to just saying hello. But in the event it does have that key, we'll say languages at language. Get that value. And then right here, call page, call the page base with a string.format of our message, which will be name and hello. And then finally, the content we want to render is the page with text HTML. If all went well, this will work. If all did not, it won't work. It compiled, so that's a good sign. Come over here, and now we should be able to say hello. We'll go we put those in the wrong order. Yeah. So there we go. We now have it sending results as we wanted. So we can see it says hello to that person in multiple languages. Is anyone not gonna do this bonus business? Something to keep in mind in all the studios and the assignments, when it says the bonus mission stuff, if you're attempting to do that and it's taking up a lot of time or proving more difficult than you want, it is in no way required. And specifically, there is a sort that it mentioned as a bonus mission. Don't worry about using the comparator or comparer. That is an option when you want to do sorting. Just call .sort for now. It's not this one, but specific to the assignment. That was a note that Chris wanted everyone to relay to their classes that I forgot to put in my notes, but I remember now. If there are no questions with the studio, we will move on to learning about views and controllers and how they come together.
Can you scroll through the studio code from top to bottom slowly?
Yes, so I'll go through the studio code. The only two things actually used from the using defaults are generic and MVC. We defined the cheese controller. We have a public static dictionary of languages that we declare at the top of the class. Next is the add method, which has that HTTP post filter or decorator, depending on how you choose to refer to it. That ensures /cheese/add is where all posted data goes to. And this method, you can see in the about 10 lines, we set up our message. We default hello to the English version of hello. If we were given a valid language, we then change it to whichever language the person put in there. Then we go and create our page using the page base that we made. Then we render that content and give it type text HTML for the content type so the browser reads it correctly. In index, which is the get call, so it's just /cheese. We have our page content that has the form with the method and the action specified. Specifically here is the cheese add. Then here we have our label, so that we have our name, language, specified all of the options. If we were using views, I would have used the other dictionary, but it's a hassle with adding strings together to iterate over the dictionary keys and put them in here properly. But that's what you would do for reals if you were actually doing it. You would not have a spot where you have what are effectively constants in your code and then a spot where you type them by hand. That's a good way to introduce defects into your application. So we then build the page base, passing in page content. Then we put our message like before. And then finally, we have our last function down here, which I copied out of Monday night's example that I went through. That goes and just jams a bunch of Twitter Bootstrap stuff in here, and I updated it so that it automatically does the string.format and puts the message in there so that you're not having to type string.format, put message in all over the place. I actually learned today there's an even better way in C# to do what I've been doing with string.format. I won't cover that yet because I want to make sure it works on the Mac. It worked on my Windows computer. I don't know 100% it works on the Mac yet, so I don't want to demonstrate it. I want it to fail. I was so excited though when I got to work. All the time. All right, we will go over this cheese MVC example, which I more or less just stole exactly what was in the prep work. So we'll go over that, as well as using the Razor template. Oh no. That's humorous. Not humorous for you all, but humorous for me. This is why you don't update your computer after you've made a lesson, and then not run it again after you make the update. So new MVC. So the reason that's failing is I updated the .NET library, and that example that I was about to show was created using the older version, and the newer version can't run it. So we'll go here, copy out all that was really relevant. Oh, choose controller. Sorry about this. Alrighty, and then we will add our view, which requires a new folder called cheese. Oh, that well. All right, so everything should be on the up and up again. You can ignore a lot of what happened there. I was just moving the files around. Yes, so the app that you were supposed to create, if you really wanted to, was a My Cheese, where you can go, you add a cheese, you give the cheese a name. We'll call it green cheese, which is then moldy and gross cheese. Click add, and then it shows that green is moldy and gross. We're going to add another cheese, and we will call it Colby Jack, which is the best cheese. And Colby Jack best cheese is its description. So that's what this application does. The way the code is written, I will go over here and close all the parts. So what we have here is our cheese MVC updated. This one runs in .NET 1.1. The other one runs in .NET 1.0.1. If you want to know the difference. So the first thing that I'll show here, and I'm actually going to not close that because I think it will kill the website, but we'll make that really small. So I'll show how the controller is set up. So much like the studio, I created a static dictionary that holds data However, the difference here is we're actually manipulating this dictionary to hold data. And the reason that works is because we have made it static. So every instance of our cheese controller, so each time you go and you make a request to the web server, a new instance of that cheese controller is created. But because we've declared this dictionary as static, it's the same dictionary for all of the instances of our cheese controller. So every time we go and request that route, as long as the web server is still running, we keep making these GET requests, and we still get all of what we created. If you notice, I made it a private variable. And that is because no other piece of code has any business modifying the cheeses that the cheese route, cheese controller, knows all about and has set up. So that's an example of why you would use a private dictionary or a private value of any sort. You don't want anything else to modify it. And then in here, we go and use the what I would consider almost complete magic view bag. You just go and make up whatever you want on it and assign it a value, and then you just go and use it in view. So viewbag.cheeses, what we chose to call it, and then we assign it to our variable up here, cheeses. And then view, what that goes and does by default is go and render the corresponding view file, which will be much like our controller's cheese controller. In your views, you go view, views, cheese, and then each one of the actions inside your controller has a corresponding template. So the index over there maps to index.cshtml, which is sort of shorthand for C# HTML. And that's where the razor templates come in. And then our add, which as you see actually has no logic in it whatsoever. It's all in the template because the add page just has a form for people to enter a name and a description. So all the add does is go and render this add.cshtml. And then we have one more route. If you notice, there's not a template for it. But we have one more route called new cheese, which we've gone and made a route called cheese add, which will be the same as that get, and this post explicitly handles just the HTTP post. And it gets a name and a description, much like the studio. And in this case, we then go and add the cheese that the person put on there. So that cheeses.add is the method on the dictionary that allows you to go and add a new element to your dictionary. So we put the name and the description on there. And then finally, we use this built-in redirect to redirect back to the index page, which is a very common paradigm on websites and in web development. To when you go and add something to your collection, you redirect to that collection, a listing page of it. So I'll show the add template first because it has the least amount of things in it. So if we go and look at our add template, it goes and looks much like the forms that we have been using this whole time. But what's nice is we actually got to write out HTML that's fairly easy to read. So we wrote out a form, it has a post method, and then we have our name and our descriptions. And then at the end, we have an input type equals submit, value add cheese. And that's what goes and renders the form when we go to this add cheese page. There's not a lot happening here. But if you notice, there's all this surrounding UI stuff that you sort of get for free. And that's because of this shared folder here, this layout.cshtml has what I had sort of just jammed into that page build function. So now this has our HTML, and that is actually what I did. I copied this out of the template. I didn't ever write it myself. So you can just feel like I cheated. And then right here is the part that makes your pages work. So that @render body automatically puts in whatever your controller is returning into that body. And then all the other pieces in here do some work to load your JavaScript and your HTML, your CSS. Now in the navigation, you'll notice you can click home, and it takes you there. We can go directly to cheese. There are these nice helpers where you define a controller name and your controller action. And that goes, and C# goes and automatically sets up the link for you. So if you were to ever go and update your routes later, you don't have to go and update your HTML, which is a pretty nice little feature. So the more complex page to look at, because it goes and actually uses some C# inside of the page, is the index.cshtml, which shows initially that first idea of using a link. So we do an ASP controller attribute on there. Cheese is our controller. That maps to this cheese controller. And then you tell it the action, which is add. And then that automatically sets up the route that is defined for your controller action add. So if we were to go and change the way that we wired that up to a different URL using route, it would actually go and update it correctly for you in the rendered HTML. Then the other piece that we do here, this viewbag.cheeses.count, if that is equal to 0, then we're not going to show anything. We're going to say no cheeses yet. Which we restart the server, we'll see that we have no cheeses. And this will properly show, once it loads, no cheeses yet. And that is because we use the little syntax bonus here. Use the @ symbol anytime you want to start writing C# code directly in your Razor template. So you do the @if viewbag.cheeses.count equal to 0. And the cheeses is that dictionary that we put on there. Right here, viewbag.cheeses is equal to our static cheeses variable. And dictionaries have a count method on them, which is how it knows if there's anything in it. That's why if it equals 0, it can say, oh, there's no cheeses. And the next thing that we do is we use this for each to then iterate over the cheeses whenever we actually have them. This key value pair is a built-in type in C# that you automatically get whenever you iterate over a dictionary. You might Google search various different ways of iterating over a dictionary and find them. This seems to be a fairly standard way to do it because it makes it obvious to whomever is looking at your code, and it's the default of what the language does when you iterate over a collection that contains a dictionary. So using key value pair, we know it is a string of strings, a string key and a string value, because that's what we've declared our dictionary to contain. And we call that variable in here cheese. And because it's a key value pair, cheese will then have an attribute of key and an attribute of value that you can then access and display them on the page. So in this case, I put some bold tags around it. It would make it a little easier to read. We have the cheese key and the value, and that is why over here, once we add a cheese, goes and displays it. Now, one of the advantages to these templates is if you wanted to go and update them, immediately refresh and see that update. So every time we were updating the HTML before, in our controller, it was a pretty big hassle. You had to go and stop the server, restart it. It can be nice to just go get everything working with your template. Or once you have your controller working and sending the data you expect, you can then just play with the template and get the UI working. You don't have to keep restarting the server. Which makes that a lot easier. Well, I was going to do an overview of Bootstrap. We don't have enough time before the studio. Are there any questions on that before we start the studio? How the templates sort of wire together with the controllers?
So to get that Bootstrap layout, you change the layout to equals.
To get the Bootstrap layout by default,
Share.
if you look at the top, I am not overriding layout at all. So in the prep work videos, you sort of declared some variables at the top and you did layout equals null to override it so no layout was there. I prefer to have at least something decent to look at while I'm trying to get things to work, which is why I did not comment it out. So. The goal of tonight's studio so we have the cheese NVC, which is what we have here. We want the ability to remove cheeses in our view. So more or less, the UI, update the UI so that you have like a little trash can or a check mark or something here that when you click it, goes and deletes a cheese from the list of cheeses. And that is the goal for this evening. I'll push the code I have to my GitHub. The link is actually already in tonight's class. If you open the class on Canvas, it's already in there. Any questions? All right, your favorite part of the evening, where you get to stand and walk around, not deliver. You get to stand and switch places. Ooh, I could play like the Looney Tunes or Tiny Toons music when we switch. Maybe make it more fun. I was worried I wasn't going to, because my studio solution took about 15 minutes longer than I expected.
So,